y'all. Welcome to the Memoirs of a Sinner, a personal growth podcast by Her Kinkz. We all have had an experience with the fly. Flies are disgusting and they make me cringe because they'll land on anything spreading germs. Then they'll find their way in your home. Growing up, my family had fly swatters, but I figured out a tool where I don't miss. A hand towel. Now, I'm not talking about that small face towel. I know in different regions, everyone calls it something different. I'm talking about the towel that's bigger than a washcloth, but smaller than the towel you dry off with. I've been knocking flies out left and right with one. And even if they distance themselves to try and be in a place that I can't physically, something as simple as the wind from a hand towel in motion will get them moving. Let me tell you how. Now, even if you can only reach so far, you swing the towel so the wind makes it think you've actually gotten close, and then they'll start going into a panic. They panic so much flying all over the place that they don't realize that they are actually headed into the direction of what's about to end their life. That's when you, with all the strength you have, swing that towel and bam, the fly is laid out and his life has been knocked out of it. I've seen them trying to come in groups thinking that they'll get a better chance at living, assuming they'll throw you into a loop because there's so many of them. But listen to me when I tell y'all that they always find a moment when they decide they want to gather, and it's at that moment you kill two birds with one stone. You actually save more energy when they gather because every single one of them dies at once. The thing about a fly is not only do they make themselves visible, but they aren't wise enough to hide. They allow you to see them, and they make noise, so you know that they are present. God didn't give them the wisdom to know that if you want to be a pest, you need to do so without making a bunch of noise so you don't have to die in the process. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, a man named David was tending to his business when he heard a giant who was the enemy of God, taunting the Israelites who included the king in his army. So David, having had experience with defending his father's sheep, said that when a lion or bear came to steal a lamb from the flock, he would go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. And if the animal turned on him, he would catch it by its jaw and club it to death. David had enough faith to believe that if God would rescue him from the claws of the lion and the bear, God could for sure rescue him from this Philistine. Goliath had all kinds of weapons and wore armor. David had nothing but his shepherd's staff, a few rocks, and a sling. Goliath had the big head and was talking crap in verse 43, saying that David must think he's a dog to try and fight him with a stick. Let me tell y'all real quick. Growing up hearing this story, I always imagined David only having his slingshot and a stone to knock Goliath out. But the Holy Spirit showed me that nowhere in this passage do we see David putting his staff down. Did this man use one hand and one stone to knock a giant out? David was already legendary, but I'm going to really dap him up when I get to heaven, knowing that the whole time he had his staff in his hand when he ran up on Goliath and killed them. Now, winning this fight made him the enemy of someone he was looking out for because he was getting so much praise for it. The women of the town came out singing and dancing to meet Saul after David had killed the giant, but they were bragging about David's victory, so Saul envied him and started trying to kill him. God had a man named Samuel anoint David as king back in 1 Samuel chapter 16, but David didn't immediately go into the position. Somehow Saul, who was the current king, also knew that David was his replacement, but God had taken David through a process before he had given him a position. David continued to shepherd his father's sheep and was even a servant of Saul's before he wore the crown. We know just from reading 1 Samuel 17 that David is skilled in killing lions, bears, and now giants. So when it came to him having to defend himself against another person, killing them should be swift, right? Not in David's case. David knew what we ought to know: to pick your battles wisely. Although Saul was trying to cause harm to David, who was only trying to do right by God, Saul was still anointed and greatly loved by God. Now, God was disappointed in Saul, but that didn't change the fact that he had the oil. Proverbs 105, verse 25 says that we bet not touch God's chosen people, and we bet not hurt his prophets. That's not just when they are doing everything right. That's when they are out of order too. I learned this the hard way before I started sitting at Jesus' feet, but that's a lesson that will forever stick with me. If God tells you to do something, do that and nothing extra. Anything extra, you'll mess around and your life is flipped upside down. Meanwhile, you're trying to figure out why all hell is breaking loose. Baby, that's God. That is not Satan. David fled from Saul every time Saul would try to act like everything was cool, but was plotting David's death. On one instance, in 1 Samuel chapter 24, David had been hiding from Saul in a cave, and Saul, not knowing David and his men were in there, entered that cave to relieve himself. David's men started hyping him up, telling him, "Bro, this is your moment. Kill him now. Take him down. The Lord is giving you the opportunity to defeat your enemy." But instead, David cut the end of Saul's robe. This is why you have to be careful listening to other people's advice, especially when they try to throw the Lord's name in it. God ain't bit more wanted David to kill Saul, and David knew it. David's conscience began to mess with him, and he felt bad for putting his hands on Saul's robe. He says in verse 6 that God forbid that he put his hands on Saul, because it wasn't for him to attack someone that was anointed by the Lord. So Saul leaves the cave. Then David shouts out to him to tell him to look at his robe and see for himself that if he really wanted to cause him harm, he had the opportunity and didn't. That perhaps the Lord would be the one to punish Saul, because from evil people came evil deeds. David wanted the Lord to be the one to judge which of them was right or wrong. Had David defended himself against Saul instead of running away, he would have easily killed him and found himself being punished by God as well. Saul allowed his position of authority to make him prideful. Instead of valuing people, he valued the position, and God, knowing what was in his heart, intentionally developed somebody to replace him that was after God's heart. When I learned the valuable lesson in not relying on your own wisdom when it came to conflict with another one of God's children, I wrote myself a note. Love is choosing to be your best, even when other people aren't being their best. Inner peace is when you aren't reacting to people who use others as mirrors to project their unresolved wounds onto. I love you all in real life. If you'd like to stay connected, you can follow me on Instagram at the Insta About Her, TheinstaAboutHer, and make sure you subscribe and leave a review.